The Blue Jewel.
Chapter 8. Part 2. Agnoruk tried to sleep. But there were a lot of questions to be asked, and to his surprise that night he had a very real dream. He was in the underworld, in a land where the dead roamed until they reached their destination. The half-orc had never been there, but he knew it was Thani's domain. Instinctively he knew where he should go, to an endless field of black petunias. He walked through the flowers until he came to a very beautiful central garden. A fountain with several waterfalls greeted him. At the end of the garden was a throne where waiting for him was the goddess of death. The golden mask worn by her priestesses was a faithful copy of her face. In person he was a little more affable, Agnoruk thought. Thani had a huge black crow resting on his hand, caressing the goddess's face with its beak. Both the Corvid and the Immortal looked at the half-orc. The goddess smiled at the sight of him, seemed to know him and got up. The raven flew towards Agnoruk, perching on his shoulder. The half-orc was bewildered. The crow began to stroke him with its beak in the same way it had done with the goddess. Thani reached the height of the half-orc. She was much taller than him, almost ahead of him. Agnoruk was not afraid. The goddess showed no anger towards him. And when he reached his height, the goddess gave him a warm kiss on the forehead, made Agnoruk remember his childhood, and woke up. What the hell did that dream mean? It was still night and he couldn't sleep a wink again. To add insult to injury, the rain had increased in intensity. He went to the window and what he saw left him amazed. Right in front, perched on the roof of another inn, was the raven of Thani's dream. The raven bowed his head and flew away to disappear into the rain, to the dismay of the half-orc. Agnoruk was disoriented. He decided to go down to the hall of the inn. He needed a glass, better two, maybe a whole bottle, to try to assimilate this. The hall was empty except for Arras, who was sitting by the fire. Outside the rain continued to fall heavily. He took a seat next to him. The other half-orc handed him a bottle. Agnoruk took a very long drink. A long night. Agnoruk commented more to himself. Arras was watching the fire in silence. Agnoruk joined him. The door of the inn opened and an old woman entered, totally soaked. The two half-orcs turned and did not give it any importance. Surely it was a tramp who with the storm sought shelter and found the door open. As soon as she woke up, the innkeeper would kick her out of the place unceremoniously. They had nothing to do. The old woman slowly approached the two of them. The situation was too surprising and strange. They both looked at each other and put themselves on guard, so they had checked in Tripulia everything was possible. "Good morning, gentlemen." Neither of them answered. The old woman's voice was harsh and deep, with a strange, very nasal accent. "They don't mind if I can dry a little by the fire." Agnoruk gave way to him and placed himself behind Arras. "Thank you very much. At my age this rain is not good at all." The old woman took off the robe that covered her head to dry her little matted white hair. An empty eye and large wrinkles indicated her age. With the other eye she looked at the two half-orcs. "One can consider myself very lucky today. It is the most important day of my life." The two of them were shocked at the old woman's words. He took a deck of cards out of a sort of bag and showed it to her. Then he began to shuffle them with extraordinary skill. "My lords must pay attention to this." The old lady quickly turned and stood on the table next to her, the two half-orcs sitting in front of her. In Tripulia it was common to find all kinds of fortune-tellers who used multiple methods to predict the future, sell lucky charms and potions of dubious effectiveness. So they played along. The first card was the thief, the second card was death, the third was the black dragon, the fourth was the king of heaven, and the fifth is the palace of the gods, and the last card was a huge black raven. Neither of the two half-orcs understood anything. They were not aware of the card predictions. "What does it mean?" The old woman smiled, but did not answer. "What's wrong with both of you?" The two half-orcs turned their heads. It was Gosberg who was coming down stretching nonchalantly. Agnoruk replied. "We were with this." The two stood up and drew their swords. The old lady was not there. "Ha ha ha ha. What a scare." You are both paler than usual, such brave warriors now look like helpless fawns. Gosberg approached them jovially. As Agnoruk looked under the table, there had to be some explanation for the disappearance. I was here. An old lady threw the cards at us. Seriously, there's no one here. Gosberg sat in the chair where the old woman stood. We've both seen it. An old woman. With the rain falling, stop drinking. Gosberg drank some of the contents of the bottle. It must have been a ghost. Arras knew that this old woman was real. She had smelled the dampness of the cold water and there were still her mud footprints when she entered. Ghosts don't get wet with water. There are a lot of Megans here, maybe she was one of them and she used some spell. They both decided to go upstairs to their rooms to get some rest, but before they disappeared, Gosberg gave them a serious warning. Don't forget the cards that have been shown to you today. The two half-orcs looked at each other, didn't understand anything, and disappeared. While the Denka stared at the fire with a serious character, to murmur a few words while smiling. The thief, death, the black dragon, the king, the palace of heaven, and the raven.